It was a crisp Monday morning when 14-year-old Maya Johnson walked into the prestigious Sterling Trust Bank in the affluent Aspen Grove neighborhood. She wore the uniform of the private Westridge Academy, a simple blazer, skirt, and loafers. Maya felt both nervous and proud. Today she would make her first solo bank transaction, depositing the $5,000 scholarship check she had earned through her outstanding academic performance. This money was not only a testament to her hard work, but also a symbol of her independence, and perhaps a crucial key to the academic future she dreamed of at Westridge, easing the burden on her family. She was determined to handle this transaction on her own, without her parents' help. Maya approached the counter, her heart racing as she clutched her folder of documents. Behind the teller, Victoria Hayes, the branch manager in her late 40s, with impeccable fashion and an air of superiority, noticed Maya's arrival. Her gaze immediately sharpened as Maya handed over the check. Victoria's professional smile faltered for just a moment. "A $5,000 check?" Victoria's voice rose slightly, enough for nearby customers to hear. "For a student your age, where did this come from?" Heat rose in Maya's cheeks, but she quickly regained her composure. "It's my academic scholarship, ma'am," she explained calmly, though her hands trembled slightly as she handed over the award letter and her school ID. "I have all the documentation right here." The teller, a young man named Tom, took the check from her, his expression shifting from neutral to suspicious. He held it up to the light, inspecting it like a detective searching for a clue. After a few long seconds, he turned to Victoria, who had been watching the interaction with growing skepticism. Victoria walked over to the counter, not even glancing at Maya. "We've had a lot of fraudulent checks recently," she muttered, her tone dripping with disdain. "I'll need to verify everything." Maya's anxiety spiked. She'd expected a simple deposit, but now she was being treated like a criminal. She looked down at her bag and realized with a rush of panic that her phone was still sitting in her locker at school. I I need to call my mom," Maya said, her voice cracking slightly. "She's expecting me home soon. I don't have a phone here." Victoria barely spared her a glance. "That's not our problem," she snapped, her tone cold and dismissive. "You'll wait until we finish our verification process." The words stung. Maya stood motionless as Victoria turned away, condescension in her every step. The bank manager walked to a corner, her arms crossed in front of her, her expression smug as she observed Maya standing in the middle of the busy lobby. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she was left standing alone, unable to move. Around her, the hustle and bustle of the bank continued, but she felt as if the entire room was watching her. Whispers began to circulate among the other customers. Some glanced her way with open curiosity, others with barely concealed judgment. She stood there for what felt like an eternity. The humiliation only deepened. Every second felt endless, the marble floor beneath her feet growing colder. The steady ticking of the large wall clock seemed to drill into her feeling of helplessness. Despite the situation, Maya's mind remained sharp. She had always been observant, taking note of the way people interacted, the subtle differences in treatment, how some were treated with deference while others were ignored or brushed aside. She'd noticed it before, but today she was living it. She wanted to scream, to demand they give her back her documents, but she remained silent. Her father had always taught her to remain composed in the face of adversity, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the way she was being treated had nothing to do with the legitimacy of her scholarship and everything to do with her appearance. a young African-American girl in an upscale environment. From across the room, Maya could hear Victoria speaking to Tom in a low, almost conspiratorial voice. "I'm telling you, we need to maintain our standards here," Victoria said. "We can't just let anyone walk in and expect to be treated like they belong." Maya's heart sank. The words stung like a slap. She was being judged not for who she was, but for how she looked. Her hands clenched into fists, and she fought to keep her composure. She had worked hard for this scholarship, earned it fair and square, and now it felt like it was slipping away. She glanced at the clock again. More time passed. The whispers continued. The only thing she could do now was wait. Maya Johnson wasn't your average teenager. Despite living in Aspen Grove's most exclusive neighborhood, she had always valued simplicity over extravagance. Her family's home was elegant but understated, with no ostentatious displays of wealth, just tastefully decorated rooms and a strong sense of community. Maya's mother, Dr. Naomi Johnson, was a renowned financial expert who ran one of the most respected firms in the country. As a woman who had built her career from the ground up, Naomi had instilled in Maya a strong sense of independence and a belief that true success came from effort, not privilege. The Johnsons' wealth was substantial, but it wasn't flaunted. Dr. Naomi Johnson believed in the power of education and hard work. She often reminded Maya that wealth wasn't just about accumulating money, it was about using that wealth for good. Maya had absorbed these lessons well, excelling in her studies and winning a full scholarship to Westridge Academy, a prestigious school known for its rigorous academics. This wasn't an achievement handed to her on a silver platter. Maya had worked tirelessly, earning her scholarship on merit, not on the strength of her mother's name. Maya's decision to handle her bank deposit on her own was another step toward independence. She was 14, but she felt ready to navigate the world as an adult. The scholarship check, the culmination of her hard work, felt like a symbol of her growing maturity. Earlier that morning, before heading to the bank, Maya had carefully placed the check in her folder. Her mother sat at the breakfast table, reviewing some of her firm's financial reports, but she paused to smile at Maya. "Are you sure you don't want me to come with you?" Naomi asked, her voice warm but with a hint of concern. "I've got it, Mom," Maya replied with quiet confidence. "I'm 14 now. It's time I learned to do this on my own." Her mother had nodded, her eyes filled with pride. Naomi knew Maya was more than capable, yet she couldn't help but worry. It was a mother's instinct. Maya had reassured her, "I'll be fine. I'll go in, make the deposit, and be back before you even finish your meeting." It had seemed like such a simple task. Maya never imagined that just walking into a bank to deposit a scholarship check would lead to such an ordeal. As she waited in the corner of the bank, Maya couldn't help but reflect on the lessons her mother had taught her. She had always been raised to believe in fairness and equality, to treat people with respect and expect the same in return. But as she stood there, isolated and humiliated, she realized the world didn't always play by the same rules. Maya was forced to confront the uncomfortable reality that her appearance, her race, was a factor in how she was treated. It wasn't something she had fully understood before today. Growing up in Aspen Grove, she had never experienced discrimination like this. Sure, she'd heard about it, read about it, but it always seemed distant, theoretical. Today it was her reality. She glanced again at the clock, her anxiety rising. She had already been waiting far too long. Her mind raced. Why hadn't anyone come to check on her? Why was she still standing in the corner, when all she had done was bring in a legitimate check. The longer she stood there, the more she felt the weight of the situation pressing on her shoulders. Her mother would expect her home soon. She needed to call her, but that too was denied. Time passed slowly in the corner where Maya stood. The marble floor felt cold beneath her feet, and the constant ticking of the wall clock seemed to amplify her growing sense of isolation. People came and went, but no one spoke to her. She was nothing more than an invisible figure, a source of silent judgment in the heart of the busy bank. As Maya stood there, her mind began to race. She glanced at the other customers, some of whom were clearly being treated with favoritism. A well-dressed elderly couple walked in, greeted with warmth and respect by Victoria Hayes, who personally escorted them to a VIP area with a beaming smile and deferential tone. Not once did Maya receive such an acknowledgement. It was as if she didn't belong in this space, this world of polished marble and mahogany. A few minutes later, a young Hispanic man with a slight accent approached the counter with paperwork, seemingly wanting to wire money internationally. Victoria, who had been watching him from across the room, immediately waved him away with a dismissive, impatient gesture. "Sorry, the system is running slow today. It'll take a while to process your request," she said, her voice dripping with indifference. Maya watched, her stomach sinking, as the man walked away, clearly frustrated. Yet just moments later, when a white couple entered with similar paperwork, Victoria's attitude shifted completely. She practically beamed as she ushered them to the counter. "Of course, let me take care of that for you right away," she said, her voice smooth and eager. "You're in good hands here." Maya's chest tightened with a mixture of anger and disbelief. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't just poor customer service. This was something more sinister, something deeply rooted in bias. She knew exactly what was happening. Victoria was picking and choosing who to treat with respect, and she had made it clear that Maya didn't belong. Her hands clenched at her sides as she forced herself to remain still, refusing to let her emotions spill over. She had seen this behavior before, subtle, insidious discrimination disguised as customer service, but never had she felt it so personally, so painfully. It was as if the entire bank had turned its back on her, simply because of the color of her skin. Victoria's voice cut through the air again, this time addressing the security guard standing near Maya. "Keep an eye on her," she instructed, her tone cool and authoritative. "Make sure she doesn't try to leave." Maya's heart pounded. She had to resist the urge to shout at the injustice. Instead, she focused on her breathing, trying to stay calm, trying to block out the hurt threatening to overwhelm her. Minutes stretched on. The only sound was the occasional rustle of paper, the distant murmur of polite conversation, and the sharp clicking of Victoria's heels on the marble floor. Maya couldn't escape the sensation of being watched, that everyone in the bank was observing her, judging her. The murmurs grew louder, more frequent. Maya could hear snippets, snide remarks, whispers of pity, a few barely concealed chuckles. She felt small, powerless. The worst part was, she wasn't sure if anyone cared. No one had come to her defense. No one had stepped in to question why she was being treated this way. It was as though her suffering was invisible to them, just part of the background noise of a world that had learned to ignore injustice. Then, just as Maya's mind was beginning to unravel from the sheer weight of the situation, something caught her eye. Victoria was speaking to a tall, imposing man in a sharp suit, someone Maya didn't recognize at first. but something about his demeanor struck her as familiar. He was important, and judging by the way Victoria was speaking to him, he was someone she was eager to please. The man's name clicked in Maya's mind. Harrison Wells. The name had been mentioned by her mother before, in passing, when talking about business rivalries. Harrison Wells was the CEO of Meridian Banking Group, one of the largest competitors to the bank her mother had recently acquired a significant stake in and was in the process of reforming. Maya's pulse quickened as she watched the exchange. She wasn't close enough to hear clearly, but she could tell it was serious. Victoria leaned in toward Wells, her voice lowering to a near whisper as she handed him a manila folder. Maya's heart raced. The folder was clearly marked confidential, and though she couldn't make out the contents, it was obvious that whatever was inside was important. Maya was reeling. She had seen her mother work for years, building the trust and reputation of this institution. She knew any breach of confidence could be catastrophic. This was no simple business meeting. This was something more, a betrayal in the making. She shifted slightly, straining to hear, but her position was far from ideal. Still, she kept her eyes locked on the two figures. Wells nodded as he looked through the folder, his expression serious, even pleased. He said something to Victoria, his words too low to make out, but the smug smile that stretched across her face told Maya everything. Victoria wasn't just helping Wells. She was actively working against her own company, her own employer, effectively against Maya's mother's interests. Maya's stomach churned. It was becoming clearer. Victoria wasn't just mistreating her because of her race or age. She was using her position at the bank to sabotage it from within. Maya didn't know what was in that folder, but she knew it wasn't good, and she knew it had something to do with her mother's company. She felt a sudden surge of determination. No longer just a passive observer, Maya understood she had to act. She wasn't just here to deposit a check anymore. She had stumbled upon something much bigger, something that could affect her mother's life and career. She couldn't just stand idly by. Her eyes flicked down to the leather-bound notebook she always carried. She had been taking notes throughout her time in the bank, jotting down the discriminatory treatment. But this was critical. She had to document everything she had seen, every detail, every whisper. Maya didn't know what she could do with the information, but she knew she had to keep a record. She had to be prepared. As Victoria and Wells continued their hushed conversation, Maya quickly opened her notebook, her fingers trembling as she wrote. She noted the time, the names, the suspicious folder, everything she had observed. The conversation ended abruptly when Wells stood to leave. Victoria shook his hand with a smile, her demeanor almost too eager. Maya's heart pounded as Wells walked past her toward the exit, his footsteps heavy with purpose. Once he was gone, Victoria returned to her usual position behind the counter, but her smile was gone. She was focused, her attention now entirely on Maya, who remained standing in the corner. Maya felt a shiver run down her spine. It was as if Victoria knew she had witnessed everything. Maya's thoughts raced. She had seen enough to know something sinister was going on. But what could she do? How could she prove it? Her fingers tightened around her pen. Determination set in. She had been wronged, yes, but now she had a chance to make things right. Not just for herself, but for her mother, her family, and everyone else unfairly treated by Victoria Hayes. Maya wouldn't let this go. Maya stood silently, the weight of the situation bearing down on her. Hours of waiting, hours of humiliation had built to this moment. She had been wronged, treated as though she didn't belong, but now she had something far more valuable than her check or documents. She had the truth, and it was time to make that truth known. As if summoned by her thoughts, the bank doors opened, and in walked her mother, Dr. Naomi Johnson. Maya's heart skipped a beat. Naomi's presence was magnetic. She was calm, composed, and dressed impeccably, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded. Victoria Hayes, who had been overseeing Maya's ordeal, stood up straight as soon as she saw Naomi. "Dr. Johnson," Victoria greeted, her voice dripping with faint politeness. "I wasn't expecting you today. How can I assist you?" But Naomi didn't respond with pleasantries. She turned immediately to Maya, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight of her daughter standing alone, still isolated in the corner. A flash of anger crossed Naomi's face before she masked it with a calm exterior. "Maya, are you okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. Maya nodded, fighting to keep her emotions in check. "I'm fine, Mom," she said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind inside. "But there's something you need to know." Maya pulled out her leather-bound notebook and began recounting everything she had observed. The preferential treatment for white customers, the cold indifference shown to her and the Hispanic man, and most importantly, the conversation between Victoria and Harrison Wells. She read aloud from her notes, her voice unwavering as she recounted the suspicious meeting and the folder marked confidential. Naomi listened intently, her face hardening with each word. When Maya finished, Naomi turned to Victoria, her gaze sharp as ice. "Ms. Hayes," Naomi said, her tone glacial, "I believe you owe my daughter an apology, and I think you owe me an explanation." Victoria's confident facade began to crack. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but Naomi cut her off. "I know exactly what you've been doing," Naomi replied, her voice controlled but firm. "You've been conspiring with Harrison Wells, handing over confidential information to a competitor. This isn't just a case of poor customer service. This is corporate espionage." The bank fell silent. No one moved. Maya watched as Victoria's face turned pale, her composure crumbling under the weight of Naomi's words. She opened her mouth to defend herself but couldn't find the words. Naomi didn't give her the chance. "You're fired, Ms. Hayes," she said, "effective immediately." The words landed with a finality that seemed to echo throughout the bank. Security was called, and the large guard who had earlier escorted Maya to the corner now moved toward Victoria. "Please escort Ms. Hayes out," Naomi instructed. As Victoria was led away, her pride fully shattered, Naomi turned back to the room. "This institution will undergo a full review," Naomi announced, her voice commanding. "We will implement changes to ensure that no one is treated with the same disrespect my daughter endured today. No one." The room was still. Maya's heart beat steadily in her chest as she watched her mother take control, her strength a pillar Maya had always admired. The next few months were a blur of changes at Sterling Trust Bank. The investigation into Victoria's actions uncovered not only her attempts to sabotage Naomi's business interests, but also a pattern of discriminatory behavior. The bank's leadership was overhauled, and a new training program on equitable banking practices was put in place. As for Tom, the young teller who had initially been suspicious but later cooperated with the investigation, he was retained and required to undergo intensive anti-discrimination and fair customer service training. Maya's experience became a turning point, not just for the bank, but for her as well. She was invited to speak at Westridge Academy, sharing her story with other students. Maya used her voice to advocate for financial literacy and the importance of equality in all spaces. Standing before her peers, she smiled, knowing her painful experience had shaped her into someone who could stand up for others. She had transformed her moment of humiliation into a platform for change, realizing that even from the darkest experiences, justice and positive change could be ignited. Her mother's example had taught her that even in the face of injustice, it was possible to make a difference.